Joining me live now is Dr. Robert Rosette, his senior historian at Yad Vashem. Doctor, thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Robert.
You're very welcome.
You saw that piece. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. You're a historian. What history parallel can you draw between what happened in the Shoah and the Holocaust and what happened on October the 7th as a historian?
Well, let's start with what the survivors are saying. The survivors are talking about their experiences. And of course, their frame of reference is the Holocaust. And so on an experiential level, you can understand why they relate things that they went through on October 7th to the Holocaust, or also why one of the survivors sees it somewhat differently. But on the experiential level, such a horrible onslaught, that's what people think about. That's what reminds them of things. And the Holocaust was a very large event that went on from 1933 to 1945 that encompassed millions and millions of people and has a great variety of experiences within it. So if we look at it as an historian, though, trying to analyze what's going on, there are elements of what happened on October 7th that certainly are similar to the Holocaust. There are other aspects of October 7th that are different from the Holocaust. And so we try to compare and contrast. We don't try to draw simple parallels. Of course, that's in order to help us to really understand what's going on and what both of those events were about.
Robert, it's mind-boggling in a lot of ways. I think when a lot of people come to Yad Vashem, they don't understand and they don't see the scope. And I just wondered, from the Yad Vashem perspective, what's the most surprising thing as we mark the Remembrance Day? What is the most surprising thing that you found of the people who come there?
Well, again, there's a great many different people that come here from many places around the world, and also many Israelis, and they each come with a somewhat different understanding of what they're about to view when they go through our museum or what they might encounter when they go into our website. So I don't think there's one black and white thing we can talk about. What I found in many people that I've taken, and I've had the opportunity to take many dignitaries through Yad Vashem, is that often going through the museum, suddenly they have an understanding of the event that they didn't have before. I remember taking through Tony Blair. Tony Blair finally said at the end of his tour, he said, now I understand why the Holocaust is different from Rwanda. What's the difference between the Holocaust as an event and another genocide that occurred in the 20th century? And he understood about the completeness of the Nazis' attempt to murder the Jews, all of the anti-Semitic background to it all, that's different from what was in Rwanda.
Robert, let me show you a piece of video. This is Fredericton, New Brunswick in Canada, where a synagogue was vandalized. This is yesterday. This is yesterday now. This joins what happened in Milan. This happens what joined in Brazil. Brazil, I don't know if you're familiar with the story, that Brazil wants to start have a boycott of Jewish businesses. The video here is from Fredericton, New Brunswick. This is the Maritimes of Canada. Not exactly, we're not talking Berlin 1939. I just wondered whether or not, when you see these things that occur every day, what do you think?
Well, of course, anti-Semitism in its newest forms, since we're talking around the year 2000, is with us. And October 7th, and then Israel's response by declaring war on Hamas and continuing the battle against Hamas has brought out a great deal of anti-Semitism out of the woodwork that was there, but it's just come out in tremendous intensity and in all kinds of places that we didn't necessarily expect to see it. But it's not surprising in what it is. It's more surprising in its intensity and what's happening today. And I think that in a place like New Brunswick in Canada, as in places like Hamilton in Canada, where I visited about a year and a half ago, there is a strong anti-Semitic discourse, mostly coming from a pro-Palestinian discourse. And those things are existing with us, and we're seeing them in many places these days. It's a very difficult thing to combat. What we're talking about is, and we've been talking about also for a long time, we have to have a toolbox approach to use really everything we can think of in order to try to push anti-Semitism back towards the margins. And that's not a simple task at all today.
Yeah, the conflation, I think people don't understand that there's so much conflation that's occurring between what people would consider anti-Israel versus anti-Jewish. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. But one thing I do want to ask you about is that it's different. 1939 Berlin or 1935 Europe versus 2024 worldwide in the Jewish community. It's not as though it's going to be like, oh, don't worry, it'll all go away. I think things have changed now, haven't they?
Well, I think one of the biggest differences in 1939 or 1935, you did not have many allies fighting anti-Semitism. Today, many governments have a special representative to fight anti-Semitism. We have institutions like the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IRA, where we have 35 nations that are dedicated to remembering the Holocaust and also to fighting anti-Semitism, contemporary anti-Semitism. We have people in football and soccer around the world who are trying to combat anti-Semitism. We have presidents and prime ministers speaking out against it. We didn't see that in 1939. Nonetheless, we can't be complacent about what's going on, because anti-Semitism is a threat, and anti-Semitism has shown in the past that it has turned to really murderous. And what we saw on October 7th was a murderous form of anti-Semitism as well. So there's no room for complacency, but still we're far from where we were in 1939.
Right. So here's the question, Robert. When you see people like right now, it's almost, people in New York are waking up and they see very violent anti-Semitic incidents that occur in New York City, the largest Jewish community outside of Israel. What are they supposed to do?
Well, there's a number of things they should do if they can. First of all, they should report anything they see, because knowing what's going on is the very first and most important thing that we have to have, those statistics and that information at our fingertips. In addition to that, it's, again, I don't have a simple pill to solve the sickness of anti-Semitism. We need to be working on community level. We need to be creating as many alliances as we can within and outside of the Jewish community in order to reach people. Ultimately, we need education, and good and strong education. We need to find influencers in social media who will speak up or speak out against anti-Semitism, since many of them have millions and millions of followers. Again, what I said, the toolbox approach, but the individual doesn't have a lot to do as an individual unless he gets involved in some of these different organizations that are trying to deal with anti-Semitism.
Dr. Robert Rosette, the senior historian for Yad Vashem, joining us live now this morning. Thanks so much, Doctor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.